Welcome to Unburied Remnants. The truth was never lost. It was buried. Let's dig in. Genesis, chapter 1, verse 26. And God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness." Us. Our. If there is only one God, who was he talking to? This is not a new question. Biblical scholars have wrestled with it for centuries. The explanations you may have heard: God was talking to himself in a literary flourish, or God was addressing the Trinity, or God was speaking to the angels. All of these have serious theological and textual problems. But there is a fourth explanation, one that is grounded not in theology, but in the original languages and the wider context of the ancient Near Eastern world in which the Old Testament was written. And that explanation is this: the God of the Hebrew Bible presided over a divine council. Not other gods in competition with him, not equals, but a structured hierarchy of divine beings, what the texts call the sons of God, the Elohim, the holy ones, who existed alongside and beneath the supreme God. And they had roles, they had assignments, they had the ability to rebel, and some of them did. Let us go back to the beginning. Not figuratively, literally. Genesis chapter 1, the very first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The Hebrew word translated as God here is Elohim. And I want you to hold that word for a moment, because it is grammatically plural. El is singular, one God. Elohim is the plural form, multiple divine beings. Now, in most of Genesis and throughout the Old Testament, Elohim acts as a singular noun and takes singular verbs. And for that reason, it is translated as God, singular. But it is plural in form. Scholars call this a plural of majesty, a royal we, like an ancient king saying "we decree" rather than "I decree." That is a valid reading. But here is where it gets complicated. Because Elohim is also used in the Old Testament to refer to other divine beings. The gods of other nations are called Elohim. The spirit of Samuel, when the witch of Endor summons him, is called Elohim. The sons of God in Genesis 6, the Bene Elohim, are divine beings. The word is doing more than one job in the text, and that ambiguity is significant. And then we get to Genesis 1:26. Let us make mankind in our image. The us and our are unmistakable. The text does not say "let me," it says "let us," plural. First person plural. Who is in the room? If the divine council is a real concept in the Hebrew Bible, and I am about to argue that it is, then the clearest single text is Psalm 82. Read it carefully. God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. How long will you defend the unjust and show partiality to the wicked? The word translated as gods there, in the original Hebrew, is Elohim, the same word used for God himself. The psalm continues, "Defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. The gods do not listen." The psalm continues, "They know nothing, they understand nothing. They walk about in darkness." And then the stunning conclusion. "I said you are gods. All of you are sons of the Most High. But you will die like mere mortals, fall like every other ruler." This psalm describes divine beings, called Elohim, called sons of the Most High, who were given responsibilities and failed them, who were supposed to ensure justice among the nations, but instead defended the unjust. And they are now condemned to die like humans. This is not a metaphor about human judges. The text describes them as sons of the Most High, which in Hebrew cosmology places them in the divine realm, not the human one. Jesus himself quotes Psalm 82 in the Gospel of John. When he is challenged for claiming to be God, he responds by quoting the psalm. Your own law says you are gods. If God called those people gods, how can you object to what I am saying? Even Jesus is pointing to the reality of a divine council. The divine council appears again in one of the oldest books of the Bible, Job. Chapter 1. One day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The sons of God, again, B'nai Elohim, divine beings, plural, presenting themselves before God in what reads like a formal gathering, a court. And among them is the one translated as Satan, in Hebrew, the adversary, not yet the figure of pure evil from later tradition. Here, a member of the council with a specific role, the accuser, the prosecutor. And God has a conversation with him about Job. God asks, "Where have you come from?" The adversary answers, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." This is not two characters in isolation. This is a scene set within a functioning divine court. Later in Job, chapter 38, God speaks to Job from the whirlwind. He asks, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" The sons of God, divine beings, were present at the creation of the world. They existed before humanity. They witnessed what we call the beginning. Turn to Isaiah chapter 6. The prophet has a vision of God enthroned in his heavenly temple. Seraphim, six-winged divine beings, circle above. And God asks, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" For us. The divine council is present in Isaiah's throne room as well. And in 1 Kings chapter 22, a prophet named Micaiah has a vision of the Lord sitting on his throne with all the heavenly host standing around him, on his right and on his left. God asks the council who will entice the king of Israel. Spirits offer options. God chooses one. This is not one isolated passage. The divine council appears in Genesis, Job, Psalms, Isaiah, and Kings. It is woven into the fabric of the Old Testament. Now I want to show you a passage that most Western Bible readers have never seen, because the version in your English Bible is almost certainly a translation of the wrong original text. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8 and 9. Most modern English translations read something like, "When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided all mankind, he set up boundaries for the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel." Sons of Israel. That is what the version used for most Western Bibles says. But the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest surviving manuscript evidence, reads differently. The Hebrew text found at Qumran says, "according to the number of the sons of God." Let that settle. Sons of God, not sons of Israel. The Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Old Testament, made 2 centuries before Christ, also says sons of God. This means someone, at some point, changed the text from sons of God to sons of Israel. And that change completely alters the meaning of the passage. Because here is what Deuteronomy 32, 8-9 is actually saying in the older version. When God divided the nations at the Tower of Babel, he assigned divine beings, sons of God, as stewards over each nation. 70 nations, 70 divine beings. And God kept one nation, Israel, for himself directly. This is extraordinary. It means the gods of the other nations, the Anunnaki, the Elohim of surrounding cultures, are not invented. They are real divine beings, assigned by God. Beings who were supposed to lead their nations toward justice, but instead demanded worship for themselves. Which brings us back to Psalm 82. The gods of the nations, placed over them by the Most High God, have corrupted their assignments, and God is now judging them for it. Michael Heiser, a scholar of Old Testament and Semitic languages who spent his career at Logos Bible Software, wrote extensively about this. His book, The Unseen Realm, presents this framework not as fringe theory, but as what the original Hebrew texts actually describe. He calls it the divine council worldview, and it is the framework the biblical writers assumed, because it was the framework of the entire ancient Near Eastern world. Let me bring this together before we close. The God of the Hebrew Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is presented throughout the text as supreme and singular. There is no competitor, no equal, no rival. But beneath him, according to the texts themselves, there is a structured divine order, sons of God who witnessed creation, members of a heavenly court who received assignments, divine beings called Elohim who were placed over the nations of the world. And some of those beings rebelled. The watchers of first Enoch, the sons of God of Genesis 6, descended and corrupted humanity. The divine overseers of Psalm 82 defended the wicked and failed their assignments. The adversary of Job walked the earth looking for someone to test. This is not the tidy, simple picture that most of us were given in Sunday school, but it is what the texts say, in their original languages, in their original context, confirmed by the Dead Sea Scrolls, defended by mainstream biblical scholars. The divine council is not mythology borrowed from paganism. It is the theological structure that makes sense of Genesis 6, Psalm 82, Job 1, Isaiah 6, and Deuteronomy 32 all at once. We've established the council, the sons of God, the divine hierarchy hiding in plain sight inside your Bible. Next episode, we go one layer deeper. Open your Bible to Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8. Most translations read, God divided the nations according to the number of the sons of Israel. Now read the same verse in a Dead Sea Scroll manuscript 1,000 years older than the text your Bible was translated from. Sons of God, not sons of Israel. One word, changed. And that single word reveals two different gods, one above, one below, and a long, deliberate process of editing that almost erased the evidence. El versus Yahweh, the God behind God. Thanks for watching Unburied Remnants. If you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe to help support the channel. Stay curious, keep digging.